This is going to be the calmest part of the water shelf by the island.
As soon as I seen the forecast, I knew where I was going to be on this day. Yes, it's more challenging, but it's different and it's more memorable. And I've got the water to myself. Okay, so when I first viewed the water, I had no idea what my approach was going to be. It's just a matter of trying things out. So I set off, floating line and a couple of nymphs. Covered the water for the first hour, not a touch. So I took the nymphs off and put a single weighted lure on. And it didn't take long before I had my first fish. So I had a tea break and switched to the intermediate.
So I'm doing here now. Got the intermediate, slow intermediate. So it's a matter of just finding, oh, there's a fish. I just felt the line, I thought I had weed at first. Really strong fighting fish. Not the biggest, the other one I had was a cracking fish. Didn't have the camera on at the time, well I didn't have the camera with me. I was just going out testing the water. I think the fly is in the net. Yes. And off he goes. Well, that was quite a good start. It's sometimes quite tricky to locate where the fish are. Now in these strong winds, it's not always going to be where you think it is, you know. A lot of the time when you get a wind, and they always say, head towards the windward bank. It's not always the case at the moment. Certainly when there's plenty of food about on the surface, just pushing that food into that bank, fair enough. But there's a lot of other things to consider.
Okay, we're often told, always cover the windward banks. Okay, so that may seem obvious when you've got all that food stuck in the surface film and blowing in towards the windward bank. But hang on a minute, where's all this food coming from? For a lot of it, it can be blown in on the wind from the other side of the lake, and it can land anywhere. So I am sure that a lot of this food will be picked off long before it reaches the windward bank. And what about when there's hardly any food on the surface, like in the winter months? So for a lot of the time, these windward banks could be barren and void of food. So is there anywhere worth targeting during the winter months? The main diet for the fish is going to be aquatic, and amongst these is the minnow. And the minnow will never be too far away from the reeds. So as everybody knows, if there's going to be reeds, there's a good chance there's going to be food. So the reeds are a bit like a nursery, and the fish know it. But the thing is, they're not easily caught. They're deep in the reeds, where the fish can't get at them, but occasionally one may wander. And that's when the fish will often patrol these areas, on the off chance that something may come out beyond the reeds. But these areas aren't always successful. But it's understanding what's going on around them reeds that'll improve your chances. So the first thing to understand is that not all fish will know of this food source. For instance, stockfish. Stockfish have been hand-fed for all their lives, and then they're put into this unknown world, not knowing what food is. They've got to work around the water, work out what food is, where it is, and when it is. So there's going to be a far greater chance that you're going to pick up more of the resident fish. Now, like everything in the wild, you've got to preserve energy to survive, and the resident fish is no different. So this fish knows when to target these areas. They are waiting for a strong enough undertow. So if you're not sure what the undertow is, it's a current that's beneath the surface, and it's driven by one temperature and the wind, and it'll always move in the opposite direction to the wind. So when there's a strong enough undertow, it can dislodge food from the reeds.
And the undertow can be quite strong, more often than not it's stronger than what the actual wind is. So what you find then because it's such a strong wind and a strong undertow, it's not very comfortable or beneficial for the fish to be there unless there's food there. Now, as I say, this time of the year, there's not much coming off on the top to warrant going down there, but a good undertow can drag a lot of aquatic life away from reeded areas. So if you've got a bank and it's got plenty of reeded areas, then it's worth giving that a go a lot deeper, get into that undertow. But if there's a lack of that aquatic life in that area, that's going to be a bit uncomfortable for the fish. The fish are going to have to tolerate those strong good currents, and at this time of the year they're trying to conserve more energy, so they're going to go to somewhere a lot more comfortable. The other thing that you've got to consider is, if you're fishing these conditions, obviously make sure you're safe, because the fly can be all over the place. You've got a hood, keep your hood up even though it's not raining, keep that hood up, it can protect you. Make sure you've got your glasses on, and more important is the gear you're going to use. Now, if I was fishing this with a softer action rod or a mid-action, I would be struggling. What I'm using is a fast tip, but it's also a lighter rod. Now, there's a lot of talk about heavier rods in these sort of conditions. Now, the thing is, you probably might find it's fine for a while, but after an hour, hour or two, you're going to find that heavier rod is quite hard work in these winds. My arm aches just from holding the rod out, and I'm trying to stop the wind from pulling it around. God, that is so strong.
As I'm working my way down this arm, I'm becoming more and more exposed to the wind, and holding on to that rod is becoming a lot harder. I've had no fish, but even picking up on the knocks is very difficult. In normal conditions, when you find that you're getting a few knocks, you'll probably fish there a little bit longer. But in these conditions, unless the fish is well on, you're not going to know nothing. And switching to the intermediate is obviously a good bet. When I first got you, the floating line was manageable, and at least you could fish it. But this storm is definitely picking up. The forecast was that it was going to get at its worst later on this evening. But if you was to have the floating line in this, your fly wouldn't get no more than an inch or two below the surface. It would be dragged across too quickly. With the intermediate, at least I've got a bit more control. And all I can do is to keep pulling until it goes tight.
Okay, just come round to this side. I think at about 4 or 5 casts, a little bit slower, deeper and nothing. So I brought it back up and then luckily pulled into this fish.
Okay, from no contact with the fly to having contact with the fly. This is also important. It's a bit like being put in a dark room, spun around and asked to point at the door. It would be a hell of a lot easier if you could put your hand on the wall to find the door.
This fish, I felt this. I felt a couple of, like, the weight on the line just went a little bit heavier. Nothing happened for a while, and then I gave it a good draw and then the fish was on. So I think it must have been following the pattern and coming in at the same pace, but I think he probably already took the fly or the lure. Again, so strong. Bloody hell. They really do have some energy, these fish. That looks a tidy fish. I've just seen the tail then. It's a better fish than I thought anyway. That's probably why he's so damn strong. Whoa, Jesus. It does look like a really good fish. Wet hands. Okay. Pretty damn good fish, that. Strong fish, good tail on it. And I got a funny feeling I've met this fish before. He's got a bit of a thing on the side of his mouth, which looks familiar to me. Maybe not, it might be just coincidence. It's nice just to have that bit of break. I've got the bit of an island here that's behind me, casting down the wind. Doesn't make, oh, there's another one. Doesn't have to make it a bit easier. What I'm doing now is a good bit deeper, steady draw. Well, that fish come in a lot easier. Say that, he'd probably start kicking and screaming now. That was a doddle to bring in compared to the last one. Obviously he's a much smaller fish. Hooks in the net. So he's a much smaller fish. Still in good quality. Good net. Let it drop a good bit. Steady draw. Not saying it'll work again. I don't know how long I was letting it drop. I don't count. To be honest, I can't even remember anyway. I may not have let it drop as much as that. If I'm ever unsure, I'm always going to go a bit higher rather than lower anyway. Again, with that fish, I just felt the line just going that little bit tighter. It wasn't a thump. It just went a little bit tighter and I had to line strike. It wasn't aggressive, just pull into it gently.
Whenever I'm fishing a sinking line, I often find that the line strike is more effective than lifting into the fish.
Perhaps they've moved on. Yeah, ooh. That was a much more positive take than I've had so far. It definitely hit it hard. It felt the hook too, I'm sure. Okay, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to switch. I've had my Hayes Castle Black and Blue on for all that time. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to give one of my older patterns a bit of a chance. Damsels, they're in there. Let's see, if I go with, I'll try this one, the Eladine mongrel. It's mainly for coloured water. It does actually, it always catches fish. It's quite small. It's only about, this particular one is only about an inch long, but it's bulkier. And there's a few things at this point here I do a little bit of work with it, but it's a good pattern. We're going to give this a go. I haven't used this for quite a while, and I normally fish it on a floating line, and I can fish it really slow as well. Okay, just in the last 10 to 15 minutes that wind has just switched. Was heading obviously more in that sort of direction. It's coming across me now from this side. She's making a bit more difficulty getting out to them areas. Coming across that wind, you're better off going either into it or with it. That took quite a while to pick that fish up, and that was deep. Actually quite deep. Oh, I need to come off. But that was a lot deeper and I was fishing it a lot slower. I was beginning to wonder if the Elladyne pattern wasn't actually going to work, but I've been picking them up a lot higher on that lighter weight pattern of the Hayes Black and Blue. So I'll give this a few more casts, see what happens. I'm going to switch to another pattern and see what that does. Now the other pattern's this bit larger. Give this a go for a while. I'll put out about another 10 casts or so with this.
What you're not really going to appreciate is how this wind is affecting the cast. Due to the bank that's directly behind me, that's sheltering me from the worst of the wind, I'm having to perform more of a steeple cast. The steeple cast keeps the line more vertical in the air on the back cast. But in doing this, I'm catching a lot more wind. So the only benefit I've got here is the faster action rod. I can create more line speed, so as soon as I've put it up in the air, I'm having to perform the forward cast a lot sooner. What I'm also noticing is how the wind is really picking up. And when I'm looking across the lake, it doesn't look so bad from here. But I have noticed how much more white water is smashing over the bank. Okay, another cast that's dead handy when you got strong winds. I'm wanting to put the pattern in the bay on my right, but with that strong wind coming down that channel, the only way to do this from this position is a back cast.
Whoa, that was a big gust. He bloody blew me over. Oh, well. Oh, not sure. I think that was a hit then. Very hard to detect. Oh, and he's off. Okay, condition has really switched. The wind was going more this way, now it's coming more southwesterly. It was more of a southerly, and it's more southwesterly now, and it's getting a lot stronger. The forecast was for very high winds. The gusts could be probably up into the 60 plus, I'd say, out there. It's impressive looking at it. There's white water everywhere. Not a problem, you'll always find somewhere to fish. But what I'm getting is, well, now it's the rain, and the rain was forecast for about 4:35, but it's not even 2 o'clock yet. And it is hammering it down. And I haven't got the right gear to stay out in these conditions. I can feel the water coming through already. And I'd only done 15-20 minutes in it. But the fishing was interesting. The whole point of me coming out here, because I knew the conditions were so wild, I thought I'd start with the floating line, put that out with the smaller stuff, moving that quick, see if the fish were higher and prepared to chase that. I did see a cracking fish or something move out there, and that dislodged a lot of water as it went into the wind. And then obviously on the intermediate, trying different levels, different speeds. But you know, it's whether you're learning something, you could go out on the next. I've been out on conditions like this before, and the fishing's been totally different. I've been out in conditions where it's totally shit, but you do go out sometimes in these conditions, and you just don't know what's going to happen until you're out there. But it's always worth a go if you can stick this weather. But yeah, I've enjoyed it. It's a short session. I haven't been out for a whole week. For me, is like wow. I enjoyed just getting the line wet, doing a bit of casting and hooking into a couple of fish. But I hope you enjoyed the video. Until the next one, take care.